Welcome back to MidPoint. Veteran economist, chairman of the Society to Advance Financial Education, Steve Beaman joins us. All right, Steve, a couple of minutes that we got here. First of all, the notion of retirement needs to be modernized. How so?
Well, I think we need to look at expanding education for everyone, especially starting younger, so that people coming into the retirement space realize that consumption has never made anyone wealthy. And as globalization and technological change the dynamics of the job structure, those folks coming up in the millennial generation and beyond will need to become capitalists. They'll need to understand how their savings can be used to fuel economic growth around the world and shift consumption into those developing countries away from the United States. That will build them the wealth they want.
So the savings has to become valued. And again, you get down to capitalism, which to many people is a dirty word, but when we're talking about the changing of the economy and the changing of the world and the globalization, capitalism just makes sense if you want to retire and at least have more than $1.95 at your fingertips, right?
There are countless stars and celebrities who've come out recently and said capitalism is what's needed to lift nations out of poverty, and that's a truism. But it's also true in America as we become the leading economic older player in the game and shift that consumption out of the United States. We have to educate people on the benefits of saving money and how to invest it so they can maximize their lifestyles. Without that, I fear for the generations coming up, frankly.
But the one thing I saw, which was very interesting, we must become educated in the haves and the have-nots, right? As that all just increases the separation, we've got to get smarter.
There's no question about it. Education is the core of the solution we seek across the board, and we need to, as a society, value education to the extent we value anything. So I think programs like yours, Ed, and I've saluted you 100 times for it, I really do credit you with what you're trying to do because it helps that agenda.
Well, we're trying to do it, too, because, quite frankly, I need to retire as well, so it's all part of my education as well, more than anything else.
Then, Ed, join me tonight at the Master of Money at 7 o'clock Central on the safefinancial.net.
We'll do that. We'll pass it on as well. Always a pleasure, Steve. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. All right, fitting that on this Veterans Day, we recall not a moment of war, but a moment of peace, when the war that was supposed to end all wars finally came to a close, the subject of this American moment.
It was called the War to End All Wars, but instead it only served as a prelude of worse things to come. It was the world's first universal war, with the nations of the United States, United Kingdom, France, Greece, Italy, Russia, and 19 other countries declaring war on Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, Germany, the Ottoman Empire, and the other European-based nations. As the wars before it, and those after it, this war would prove to be a long, bloody, and costly conflict. For the first time, chemical weapons were used in organized warfare. In 1915, the Germans unleashed 150 tons of chlorine gas at Ypres, Belgium. Then 2 years later, used mustard gas against the Russians at Riga. World War I also gave birth to a new form of battle called trench warfare. Opposing armies would build elaborate trenches opposite one another, protected by barbed wire. The trenches themselves became havens for disease and life-threatening infections due to poor drainage and sanitation. The area between the opposing armies became known as no man's land because it was fully exposed to artillery and small arms fire from both armies. Attacks, even if successful, often sustained severe casualties for both sides. So when it finally came to an end, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month in 1918, soldiers from both sides greeted the news with great skepticism. Neither side dared to let themselves believe their long nightmare had finally come to an end, leaving an estimated 8.5 million people dead and some 21 million wounded. The actual peace document, known as the Treaty of Versailles, was not signed until 6 months later, on the 28th of June, 1919. Although the face of the civilized world had forever changed, 21 short years later, history would again repeat itself. For Newsmax TV, I'm Bill Curtis, and this is an American Moment.